Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Shaira and I post planner and lettering videos on this channel. So today I do have another plan with me for you. This week is the very last week of August, pretty much the first week of September. I am using this kit from Lil Bees. This is the first time I'm actually using a Lil Bees kit. I've known about their shop obviously for a while. They're one of the first shops I've heard about, but I just never had the chance to purchase their kits, and I don't really know why. I think back in the day, it used to sell out really quickly, if I remember correctly. But I did pick up this very lovely sunflower kit. Sunflowers are my favorite flower, and I think they're a great like early fall kind of theme. And so I have like multiple sunflower themes that I'm doing this year, actually, this being one of them. And I think it's just a nice transitionary time before I get into like the deep oranges and reds and stuff like that. I am like right about a month behind on planning. I have been meaning to catch up for some time now, and I am absolutely posting this way later than I wanted to, but life definitely like sometimes just gets in the way even when I do want to accomplish things. So this is just that same case, but I definitely hope to catch up sooner than later because I don't want to be doing fall spreads in like the middle of December as like videos I'm posting. So I definitely hope to do that and maybe pull in a couple other videos. I definitely had like a really good groove going at one point, and then I kind of just fell off it at some point. But this week that I'm planning is actually a week when I traveled. And so I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what it was like to travel during the pandemic. I know it might be something that some of you might be thinking about how it would work, especially with the holidays coming up, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I at least wanted to share a little bit about my experience here. I do want to acknowledge that regardless of my experience, that the safest thing that one can do is to just stay at home, away from other people and all that. But I did acknowledge this before, that with just working from home, I have felt like I have been really close to just the general burnout associated with just work and home being in the same place. And so I kind of needed it as a reset as well. I think there are precautions that anyone can do, and I think there's different safety measures that people can take if they do choose to travel. Do I recommend it? Not necessarily. I think everyone has very different situations, and I think your experience will also be different depending on where you go. This is more so for me to just share my experience and what I did to be precautious, as well as just like overall, if you're thinking of traveling to the Pacific Northwest in the near future, then this is kind of what I experienced, at least late in the summer. And so we did not get tested prior. We did want to, but it was a matter of timing. We actually couldn't because in our county there happened to be a rule, at least that week that we were leaving, that you had to have a valid reason to want to get tested, like being symptomatic or being in contact with someone who had COVID or something like that. I think because there was a really big demand for testing at the time, there was a little bit of a resurgence in our area at the time because college students were returning to town. But we did get tested after, and so that was the precaution that we felt comfortable at least doing if we couldn't do both. So at least doing it after, because obviously then we could be harming other people that we encounter once we do end up coming home and kind of living our life again. And so we drove from San Diego to Washington to Seattle, and it was a 20-hour drive. And we chose to drive because I personally just did not feel comfortable with flying right now. I think there's a lot of people that might share the same sentiment, that it's a little bit more iffy to just share the same air that's just recirculating for several hours with that many people. I know airlines are also still taking their precautions, but like I said, everyone's going to have a different comfort level and a very different like tolerance, I guess, to things like this, because your situation will be very different. Who you're exposed to in general is going to be very different to my situation as a whole. For our entire stay, we mostly stayed at the same hotel chain, except for one inn that we happened to stay in like the middle of California because we had to, or at least I guess it's not the middle, it's actually the northern part of California. So going up, we actually took one pit stop in Sacramento and then went all the way up to Washington, to Seattle right away. Our goal was to get up to the northernmost point, basically, that we wanted to go as fast as we can so we could slowly drive down and pretty much just enjoy the rest of the trip. And so we did a couple days in Seattle, a couple days in Portland, and then we pretty much drove down, kind of did a quick pit stop in San Francisco just to break up the trip a little bit, and then we went home. And so we did this over the span of, I think it was 11 days or something like that. We happened to take the full week right before Labor Day off to be able to do this. And so we actually had a really good time. It was, like I said, one for my boyfriend's birthday, but also I just needed a little bit of a refresh by being somewhere else, by not thinking about work. And so it was really helpful for me to come back just feeling renewed and being able to do my job better, I guess. So I chose to stay at mostly the same chain of hotels because I felt comfortable with a specific chain and how well their cleanliness would be. But I know in general, I have other friends who've also stayed at other getaway type places or even Airbnbs, because even Airbnbs have the opportunity to report that they have higher cleaning standards or things that they're doing specifically to help, prevent the spread of COVID. I highly recommend that if you're considering it, to definitely look into different research out there around what surfaces do COVID type viruses stay on longer. The nice thing was it actually doesn't stay on fabric very long. So then things like the comforters and the sheets, we didn't have to worry about much. But I did personally bring disinfectant with me just to wipe down surfaces like remote controls, etc., things like that are shared in the area of even where we stayed. Even though a lot of things were actually packaged up, the hotels had lower capacity. It was just something that made me feel more comfortable. And we obviously also always had masks. For Washington, everyone pretty much had masks, and that made us feel really great about the decision to head up there. When we were trying to figure out where to go, we obviously took into consideration what are kind of their curves looking like in those areas. We were initially thinking of going to the Las Vegas-ish area or even Yosemite. But at the time, their curves were doing really bad, and there were a lot of cases just kind of happening there. And so we went up to the Pacific Northwest instead. In Portland, it was a little bit less common to have masks. I wouldn't say it was non-existent, but you could see people who weren't wearing masks more often than Seattle for sure. And so overall, I think compared to California at the time, things were a little bit more open in these locations. So obviously each state has very different regulations. So if you're crossing state lines, definitely look into what's going on in the specific state that you're going to. But yeah, overall, so we drove up to Seattle, stayed here for a couple of days, and then we went down to Portland. We pretty much stayed in Portland for a day and a half, I believe. We got to do a lot more naturey things, so visiting waterfalls, doing mini hikes and stuff like that. More active things. We did also do some touristy things, and overall, I felt pretty comfortable with most of what these states were doing. There was a lot of timed entry, and so you had to pick up a ticket for a very specific time to go somewhere, or they had capacities, or people were required to wear masks at all of these places. When it came to eating out, we mostly did outdoor dining. There were a few places where we had to just sit in because that was just the structure of the restaurant. But overall, we felt pretty comfortable there. And so on the way down, we obviously did however many days that we were going to do in Oregon. Right before that, we actually stopped by at Mount Rainier, and it was really beautiful because it was still wildflower season. So it was really great, and the weather was really great. One thing I do want to acknowledge, speaking of weather, was we actually barely just missed all of the fires going on. So when we passed by the Bay Area growing up, the Bay Area already had the fires going on, but we didn't really experience it on our route up. On our way down, maybe a couple days after we had left, was when Washington and Oregon kind of caught on fire. And as far as I know, the air quality has gotten better in a lot of these cities, but even though the media is not talking about it, there are very much still fires in these areas. Yeah, so I at least wanted to acknowledge that. And so when we did drive down, we went through Oregon. We drove down the Oregon coast, which was really beautiful. It's pretty different from the California coast, at least in terms of just like what you see. So that was really awesome. And then we did a quick pit stop in San Francisco just to break up the trip. Overall, we were driving half the time and I was sitting on my butt for most of the days. So overall, I had a really good time during this trip. It was great because I felt safe enough even though we were in totally unfamiliar territory that wasn't just our home, and I definitely came back a bit more refreshed and able to kind of come back stronger, I guess. And so if you are considering traveling during this time, obviously I think international travel is totally out the door right now given current situations, but if you are considering going anywhere, especially if it's not like visiting family or anything, I would definitely recommend looking into state regulations where you're going, if you are crossing state lines, and all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that you know what's going on and you can figure out what precautions you need in order to feel safe. So this is the final spread. I'm just writing down some things at our highlights. Unlike the last few months, there were way more highlights, so I did do like a daily versus just one per week. I'm going to go over the leftovers. If you have any questions about where a sticker is from or anything I did in the Pacific Northwest, definitely let me know. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this plan with me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.